Cornwall, April 1820. The morning fog rolled in from the Atlantic with the relentless persistence of an unwelcome truth, wrapping the small stone cottage in a shroud of gray that seemed to press against every window pane. Inside, Dorothea Winters stood frozen before the hearth, her fingers trembling as they gripped the cream-colored envelope bearing a seal she had not seen in 6 years. The Winters family crest stared back at her like an accusation, its silver wolf rendered in wax that had cooled into a permanent snarl. Behind her, 5-year-old Charlotte hummed softly as she played with her wooden doll, blissfully unaware that the letter in her mother's hands held the power to shatter the fragile sanctuary they had built together in this forgotten corner of England. Thea's breath caught as she broke the seal, her eyes racing across the bold masculine script that commanded rather than requested her presence at Fernhurst Hall within the fortnight, bringing with her the daughter of Captain Nathaniel Winters. If stories of mothers who would sacrifice everything to protect their children move your heart, subscribe now and join us on this journey. You will not want to miss what happens next. The words blurred as tears threatened, and Thea's mind flew back 6 years to the day she had last stood before the Winters family, a frightened widow, barely 20 years old, carrying the child of their fallen son. Lady Sybil Winters had received her in the drawing room of the London townhouse with all the warmth of a magistrate pronouncing sentence. The older woman's face had been carved from marble, her eyes like chips of ice as she surveyed Thea's swollen belly with undisguised contempt. "A secret marriage," Lady Sybil had said, her voice dripping with disdain. "How convenient that my nephew allegedly married you mere weeks before departing for the continent, with no witnesses of consequence and no formal announcement to society." "There were witnesses, my lady," Thea had protested, her voice shaking. "The rector and his wife in the village chapel near my father's practice. Nathaniel wanted to marry before he left. He said if anything happened to him, he wanted me protected." "Protected," Lady Sybil had repeated, the word transformed into something obscene. "Let me be clear, girl. This family will not acknowledge a marriage conducted in secret by a dying man desperate for comfort. Your father was a country physician of no consequence, and you are the daughter of even less. Whatever child you carry may well be anyone's bastard." Thea's stomach clenched, the cold floor of that London drawing room seeming to rise up beneath her feet again. Shame and fury burned as freshly as they had 6 years prior. She had pleaded, had shown them Nathaniel's letters, had offered to swear before God and the law. Lady Sybil had remained unmoved. "Leave now," the older woman had commanded, "and perhaps we shall be generous when the child is born. But understand this, if you persist in these claims, if you attempt to force this family's hand, I shall use every resource at my disposal to prove you a liar and your child a bastard. And when I succeed, I shall see that child removed from your unworthy care and placed where it belongs. Now get out of my sight." Thea had fled London that very day, her small savings clutched in her reticule, grief and terror warring in her breast. She had made her way to Cornwall, to this remote cottage where her late mother's sister had once lived, and there she had given birth to Charlotte with only the local midwife in attendance. For 5 years, she had lived in careful obscurity, taking in sewing and occasional work as a music instructor for the local gentry's children, always using her married name of Mrs. Winters, but never claiming connection to the aristocratic family. She had told Charlotte stories of her brave papa who had died defending England, but never mentioned that the papa had been the younger son of a Marquess, that Charlotte herself was Lady Charlotte Winters, granddaughter of a peer. Now somehow they had found her. Thea forced herself to read the letter again, this time absorbing every word. It was not signed by Lady Sybil, but by Jasper Winters, Marquess of Fernhurst, who identified himself as Nathaniel's elder brother and Charlotte's uncle. The tone was formal, almost cold, but not overtly hostile. He required her presence, the letter stated, to discuss matters pertaining to the future and welfare of Lady Charlotte Winters, only surviving child of the late Captain Nathaniel Winters. He had used her daughter's proper title, Lady Charlotte Winters. The acknowledgement made Thea's heart race. To see it written in his hand, a simple fact rather than a desperate claim, was validation she had ceased to hope for. This was not a summons to defend herself, but something else entirely, though what she could not yet fathom. "Mama, why are you crying?" Charlotte's small voice broke through her thoughts. Thea quickly wiped her eyes and turned to her daughter, summoning a smile that felt like it might crack her face. The child was so beautiful, with Nathaniel's dark curling hair and serious gray eyes. She had his quick mind, too, already reading simple books and showing an aptitude for numbers that made Thea's heart ache with pride and loss. "I am not crying, sweetheart," Thea lied gently. "I was only thinking of your papa." "Will we see Papa in heaven someday?" Charlotte asked, her expression solemn. "Yes, darling, someday. I wish someday was now. I should like to meet him." Thea knelt beside her daughter, gathering the small, warm body into her arms. "Your papa would have loved you so very much. He does love you, I am certain, watching over us from heaven." What she did not say, what she could never say, was that she feared they were about to lose everything they had built in this small, safe corner of the world. The Marquess of Fernhurst had resources Thea could scarcely imagine. If he chose to exercise his legal rights as Charlotte's closest male relative, he could take the child from her with a word. The law was brutally clear on such matters. A widow had no rights that superseded those of a male guardian, particularly one of rank and fortune. The fortnight that followed passed in a blur of feverish preparation and mounting dread. Thea packed their meager belongings, paid her debts, and arranged for the cottage to be let in her absence, though she harbored little hope of returning. She sewed new dresses for Charlotte from fabric she could ill afford, determined that her daughter should at least look respectable when presented to her grand relations. They traveled by mail coach, an exhausting 3-day journey that left them both grimy and weary. Charlotte bore it with remarkable patience, her wide eyes drinking in every new sight, asking endless questions about the countryside they passed. Thea answered as best she could, all the while rehearsing in her mind what she might say to the Marquess, how she might plead for mercy, for the chance to remain in her daughter's life. Fernhurst Hall appeared through a break in the trees like something from a fairy story, all golden stone and soaring windows, set in grounds that seemed to stretch to the horizon. Thea's heart sank. This was the world Nathaniel had come from, a world of wealth and privilege she had glimpsed only briefly during their courtship. How foolish she had been to think their love could bridge such a vast divide. The butler who received them was an elderly man with kind eyes who introduced himself as Morrison. He showed them to a suite of rooms in the family wing, not the servants' quarters, which Thea took as either a good sign or a cruel joke. The rooms were beautiful, far finer than any she had occupied since leaving her father's modest house, and Charlotte was enchanted by the 4-poster bed with its embroidered hangings. "His lordship will see you in the library after you have refreshed yourselves," Morrison informed her. "Shall I send up a maid to help you dress, and perhaps some refreshment for the young lady?" Thea accepted gratefully, and within the hour found herself walking down a portrait-lined corridor with Charlotte's small hand clutched in hers. The faces of long-dead Winters looked down at them with expressions ranging from stern to sympathetic. Thea recognized none of them, but Charlotte stopped before a portrait of a young man in military dress. "He looks like me," the child observed. Thea's throat tightened. It was true. The painting depicted a youth of perhaps 18, with Charlotte's dark curls and serious eyes, though his expression held a mischief that Charlotte had not yet developed. There was no nameplate, but Thea knew it must be Nathaniel, captured in paint before war, and death had claimed him. "That is your papa, sweetheart," Thea managed to say. Charlotte studied the portrait with grave attention. "He looks nice. I think I should have liked him." "He would have adored you." Morrison cleared his throat gently. "The library is just ahead, madam." The room they entered was magnificent, 2 stories of books climbing toward a frescoed ceiling with tall windows letting in the late afternoon sun. A man stood before one of those windows, his back to them, hands clasped behind him. He was tall, his shoulders broad beneath a perfectly tailored coat of dark blue superfine. His hair was darker than Nathaniel's had been, almost black, with silver threading through it at the temples. "Mrs. Winters," Morrison announced, "and Lady Charlotte Winters." The man turned, and Thea found herself looking into eyes the precise shade of Charlotte's, gray and penetrating, set in a face that was harder and more angular than Nathaniel's had been, but unmistakably of the same family. This was Jasper Winters, Marquess of Fernhurst, the brother Nathaniel had spoken of, with a mixture of admiration and exasperation. He was studying her with the same intensity she was studying him, his expression unreadable. Then his gaze dropped to Charlotte, and something flickered across his features, too quick to identify. Pain, perhaps, or recognition. "Mrs. Winters," he said, his voice deep and measured. "Thank you for coming. It is a considerable journey." "You left me little choice in the matter, my lord," Thea replied, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will. A slight smile touched his mouth, devoid of warmth. "True enough, please sit." He gestured to a pair of chairs arranged before the fireplace. Thea guided Charlotte to sit beside her, acutely aware of how shabby their traveling clothes must appear in this magnificent room, how out of place they were in this world of wealth and privilege. Jasper Winters took the chair opposite them, his movements controlled and economical. He studied Charlotte openly, and the child, to her credit, met his gaze without flinching. "You are very like your father," he said finally. "Mama says he was brave," Charlotte responded, her voice small but clear. "He was, very brave." Something genuine entered the Marquess's voice. "He saved my life once, did you know? In Spain, before Waterloo. I owed him a debt I never had the chance to repay. But I will not fail his widow and child in his stead." This was not what Thea had expected. She had braced herself for accusations, for demands, for cold legal pronouncements. She had not expected this man to speak of his brother with such evident emotion. "Why did you summon us here, my lord?" she asked when the silence stretched too long. Jasper transferred his attention to her, and Thea forced herself not to look away from that penetrating gaze. "Because a grave injustice was done to you and to my niece," he said quietly. "I returned from the continent only a year ago. It took time to learn of Nathaniel's secret marriage, longer still to locate you. The church records were eventually found, along with letters he wrote, but never had the chance to send. Letters that Lady Sybil apparently intercepted and concealed." Thea's heart hammered against her ribs. "Then you know the marriage was legal. I know that my brother loved you and married you in full accordance with the law. I know that when you sought refuge with this family, you were turned away with threats and cruelty. I know that you have raised his daughter alone for 5 years, with no support from the family that should have embraced you both." His voice had taken on an edge of steel. "I am ashamed of the treatment you received from this family, Mrs. Winters. I am here to rectify that wrong, insofar as it can be rectified." Thea felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. "What do you want from us?" "I want to offer you and Charlotte a home. Here, at Fernhurst, where you both belong. Charlotte is the only living child of a Winters. She is entitled to her father's name, her father's legacy. You are entitled to respect and support as the widow of a Winters son." "And in exchange?" Thea asked, unable to believe such generosity came without conditions. Jasper's expression hardened slightly. "There is a complication. Under English law, as Charlotte's nearest male relative, I have legal guardianship of her. You, as her mother, have no formal rights in that regard. If we are to proceed in a manner that protects Charlotte's interests and ensures your continued presence in her life, there is only one solution I can see." Thea's hands clenched in her lap. "What solution?" "Marriage," he said bluntly. A marriage between you and me would give Charlotte a complete family, legitimate her position beyond any question, and ensure you could never be separated from your daughter by legal maneuvering. Thea stared at him, the sound of the grand clock ticking in the silence suddenly deafening. Marry him? The man she had met only moments ago? You want to marry me? A woman you have never met until this moment? I am proposing a practical arrangement, Mrs. Winters, not a romantic entanglement. I require a wife to provide me with an heir. You require protection and security for your daughter. A marriage between us solves both problems efficiently, whilst securing Charlotte's future as my acknowledged ward. You speak of marriage as though it were a business contract, Thea said, her voice shaking with anger and hurt. Is it not? He replied coolly. Most marriages among our class are exactly that. At least I am being honest about the terms. Charlotte had been sitting quietly, her eyes moving between them, like a spectator at a game of battledore. Now she spoke up, her voice uncertain. Does this mean you would be my new papa? Jasper's expression softened as he looked at the child. I would be your uncle and your guardian, Charlotte. Not your papa. No one could replace him. But I would do my very best to care for you and your mama. Would we live here, in this big house? Charlotte asked. Yes, and would Mama be happy? The question hung in the air. Jasper looked at Thea, and she saw something in his eyes that might have been compassion. I hope she would be, he said quietly. That is my intention. Thea's mind raced. She had expected many things from this summons, but not a marriage proposal from the Marquess of Fernhurst. The offer was as practical as he claimed, she could see that. As his wife, her position would be unassailable. Charlotte would grow up with every advantage, acknowledged and protected by one of England's most powerful families. But to marry without love, to enter into a union of pure convenience with a stranger, however honorable his intentions, it went against everything she had believed about marriage, everything her union with Nathaniel had been. Yet what choice did she have? If she refused, Jasper could still claim guardianship of Charlotte. At best, Thea would remain in her daughter's life as a dependent relation, always aware that her position existed at the Marquess's sufferance. At worst, he might decide a child needed a proper mother, a woman of his own class, and Thea would be gently but firmly removed from Charlotte's life. I need time to consider this proposal, my lord, she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. Of course, take what time you require. You and Charlotte are welcome to stay here while you deliberate. I should tell you, however, that Lady Sybil is expected to arrive within the week for the local assembly. She does not yet know of your presence here. A chill unrelated to the grand hallway settled deep in Thea's bones. You invited her here? She invites herself everywhere, Jasper said dryly. I have not yet informed her of my intentions regarding you and Charlotte. I thought it best to secure your agreement first. How generous of you, Thea said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Jasper stood, clearly dismissing them. Morrison will show you back to your rooms. Dinner is served at 7. I hope you will join me. It was phrased as an invitation, but felt like a command. Thea rose, taking Charlotte's hand, and left the library with her head held high, despite the turmoil roiling within her. That evening, she dressed with care in the best gown she had brought, a simple affair of pale green muslin that had seen better days. Charlotte wore a white dress with blue ribbons, looking every inch the proper young lady, despite her country upbringing. Together they made their way to the dining room, where Jasper waited in immaculate evening dress. The meal was excellent, served by silent footmen on china that was likely worth more than Thea had earned in a year. Charlotte charmed the Marquess with questions about the house and its history, and he answered with surprising patience, even smiling occasionally at her innocent observations. Watching him with her daughter, Thea felt some of her resistance soften. This man had gone to considerable effort to find them, to uncover the truth of Nathaniel's marriage. He could have ignored their existence entirely or handled the matter through solicitors. Instead, he had brought them here, offered them a home. The marriage proposal might be coldly practical, but it came from a place of honor, not cruelty. After dinner, Jasper escorted them to the music room and requested that Thea play. She protested that she was out of practice, but he insisted, and so she sat at the beautiful pianoforte and played a simple Haydn sonata, while Charlotte curled up on a settee and Jasper stood by the window, his face in shadow. When the last notes faded, he turned to her. "You play beautifully, Mrs. Winters. Nathaniel mentioned in his letters that you were accomplished." "You have read his letters?" she asked, startled. "Every one that I could find. I wanted to understand the woman my brother loved enough to marry in defiance of family expectation." "And what did you learn?" "That he chose well," Jasper said simply. "That his judgment was sound, even if his method was unorthodox." It was perhaps the kindest thing anyone from the Winters family had ever said to her. Thea felt tears threaten again and looked away, blinking rapidly. The week that followed took on a strange domestic rhythm. Thea and Charlotte explored the grounds with Morrison as their guide. The old butler proved to be a font of information about the estate and surprisingly sympathetic to their situation. He had served the family for 40 years, he told Thea, and had known both Nathaniel and Jasper as boys. "Master Nathaniel was always the wild one," Morrison said with a fond smile as they walked through the rose garden. "Laughing and getting into scrapes. Master Jasper was different, more serious. He felt the weight of responsibility even as a boy. But he loved his brother fiercely. When news came of Master Nathaniel's death, I do not think I have ever seen a man more devastated." Thea absorbed this information, filing it away as she tried to understand the man who had proposed to marry her. Each evening she dined with Jasper, and afterward they would sit in the library or music room while Charlotte played or drew. The conversations were civil, even occasionally warm, but always formal. He was courteous, attentive to Charlotte's needs, respectful of Thea's position. But he remained distant, revealing little of himself beyond surface politeness. One evening, while Thea was explaining a complex piece of music to an enraptured Charlotte, Jasper watched them from the doorway. He had entered this arrangement seeking only justice and an heir. He had not anticipated the quiet warmth her presence brought to the cold halls of Fernhurst, nor the profound admiration he was beginning to feel for his pragmatic, courageous wife. On the 5th day, Thea made her decision. She found Jasper in his study, reviewing estate accounts, and asked for a private audience. "I will accept your proposal, my lord," she said without preamble. "On certain conditions." He set down his pen and gave her his full attention. "Name them." "First, Charlotte must be told the truth about the arrangement in terms she can understand. I will not begin our marriage with deception, even deception meant kindly." "Agreed." "Second, I wish to maintain some degree of independence. I would like to continue my music instruction if there are local families who might benefit. I am not accustomed to idleness." "Also agreed, though as my wife, you will have social obligations that may limit your time." "Third," and here Thea's voice wavered slightly, "I wish for separate bedchambers. You have made it clear this is a marriage of convenience. I assume you do not expect or desire marital intimacy." Something flickered across Jasper's face, but his voice remained level. "You will have your own suite of rooms, Mrs. Winters. I would never presume upon your person without your explicit invitation." Thea felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Then we are agreed?" "We are agreed. I will have the banns read this Sunday. We can be married within the month." "So soon?" "Lady Sybil arrives tomorrow," Jasper said grimly. "I would prefer our marriage to be an established fact before she attempts any interference." Thea understood the wisdom in that, even as her stomach clenched with nervousness. A month. In a month, she would be the Marchioness of Fernhurst, a title so far above her birth It seemed almost laughable. Yet for Charlotte's sake, for the security and protection it would offer, she would do it. "Very well, my lord." "Jasper," he said quietly, "if we are to be married, you should call me Jasper." "Then you must call me Thea." He inclined his head in acknowledgement, and Thea left the study feeling as though she had just signed away her future. Perhaps she had, but it was a price she would pay gladly to keep her daughter safe. Lady Sybil arrived the next afternoon in a flurry of expensive luggage and imperious demands. Thea heard the commotion from the morning room where she sat with Charlotte, and her entire body tensed with remembered fear and humiliation. Morrison appeared at the door, his expression carefully neutral. "Lady Sybil requests your presence in the drawing room, madam, and his lordship asks that Lady Charlotte remain here with her nurse." Thea's first instinct was to refuse, to hide, to flee. But she was no longer the frightened girl of 6 years ago. She had survived poverty and isolation. She had raised a child alone. She would not cower before this woman again. "Tell Lady Sybil I will join her presently," Thea said calmly. She kissed Charlotte, smoothed her skirts, and walked to the drawing room with her head high. Lady Sybil stood before the fireplace exactly as Thea remembered her, cold and imperious in elegant black silk. She turned as Thea entered, and her eyes widened in shock and then narrowed in fury. "You!" Lady Sybil hissed. "What are you doing in this house?" "I am a guest of the Marquess," Thea replied, proud that her voice did not shake. "Guest? Do not be absurd. I ordered you to stay away from this family." "You have no authority to order me anywhere, madam." Before Lady Sybil could respond, Jasper entered the room. He took in the scene with a glance, his expression hardening as he moved to stand beside Thea in a gesture of unmistakable support. "Lady Sybil," he said coldly, "I see you have met Mrs. Winters. Or perhaps I should say, you have been reacquainted since you turned her from this family's door 6 years ago when she was a grieving widow carrying my brother's child." Lady Sybil's face flushed with color. "This woman is an opportunist and a liar. That supposed marriage was a fiction, and the child is likely not even Nathaniel's." "The marriage was legal and properly witnessed," Jasper said, his voice like ice. "I have obtained the church records and the sworn testimony of the rector who performed the ceremony. Charlotte is unquestionably Nathaniel's daughter, as even a blind man could see from her resemblance to our family. What is in question, Lady Sybil, is your conduct. You concealed letters from my brother. You threatened a pregnant widow. You denied Nathaniel's child her rightful place in this family." "I was protecting the family reputation," Lady Sybil said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "You were protecting your own prejudices," Jasper replied. "Your cruelty cost this family 6 years with Charlotte, 6 years during which Mrs. Winters struggled alone with no support. That ends now. I have asked Mrs. Winters to do me the honor of becoming my wife, and she has accepted." Lady Sybil's mouth fell open in shock. "You cannot be serious." "I am entirely serious. The banns will be read on Sunday. You are welcome to attend the wedding, Lady Sybil, or you may return to London. But you will treat my future wife with the respect she is due, or you will find yourself no longer welcome in any property I control." It was a threat delivered with perfect politeness, but a threat nonetheless. Lady Sybil looked between them, her face working with suppressed rage, before she turned on her heel and swept from the room without another word. A tremor ran through Thea's hands as the adrenaline faded. Jasper noted it instantly and guided her, gently to a chair. "Sit, you have gone quite pale. I never thought to hear anyone defend me to her," Thea whispered. "Thank you." "You need not thank me for simple justice," Jasper replied. "Though I confess I have wanted to put Lady Sybil in her place for years. She has been insufferable since my father died." Despite everything, Thea found herself smiling weakly. "You enjoyed that?" "Perhaps a little," he admitted, and for the first time, she saw a genuine warmth in his eyes. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the estate chapel, a small, intimate affair attended only by household staff and a few local gentry. Charlotte served as flower girl, delighting in her role and scattering rose petals with great concentration. Thea wore a gown of ivory silk that the local dressmaker had created in record time, simple but elegant, with seed pearls embroidered at the bodice. Jasper stood waiting for her at the altar in his best dark blue coat, his expression solemn but not unkind. As Thea walked down the aisle alone, no father or brother to give her away, she thought of Nathaniel and wondered what he would think of this strange turn of events. She hoped he would understand, would forgive her for marrying his brother out of necessity rather than love. The ceremony was brief. Thea spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice, Jasper in his deep, measured tones. When the rector pronounced them man and wife, Jasper lifted her hand and pressed a chaste kiss to her knuckles, and Thea was the Marchioness of Fernhurst. The wedding breakfast that followed was pleasant enough. Charlotte chattered happily about the ceremony, and Jasper was attentive to both of them, ensuring their plates were filled and their glasses never empty. But when the meal ended and the guests departed, an awkwardness descended. They were married now, bound together by law and necessity, but still strangers in every way that mattered. That night, Thea sat alone in her beautiful new bedchamber, wearing a nightgown she had stitched herself, wondering what she had done. She had married a man she barely knew, a man who had proposed out of duty and honor but certainly not love. Charlotte was safe. Charlotte was legitimized and protected. But Thea herself felt more lost and alone than she had in the little cottage in Cornwall. A soft knock at the connecting door made her start. "Yes?" Jasper's voice came through the wood. "I wanted to ensure you had everything you needed, that you were comfortable." Thea opened the door. He stood in his dressing gown, his dark hair tousled, looking somehow younger and more vulnerable than she had yet seen him. "I am comfortable, thank you." "Thea," he said quietly, "I know this is not the marriage either of us might have chosen, but I want you to know that I will do everything in my power to make you happy here. You and Charlotte both. You are my family now." "Family," Thea repeated. The word felt strange in her mouth. "I hope," Jasper continued, "that in time we might become friends, if nothing else. I would like Charlotte to grow up seeing harmony between us, not mere civil tolerance." Thea found herself softening despite her resolve to maintain emotional distance. "I would like that as well." "Then we shall endeavor to make it so." He paused. "Sleep well, Thea." "Good night, Jasper." He withdrew, and Thea closed the door, leaning against it for a moment. "Friends," he had said. It was more than she had dared hope for, and perhaps friendship would be enough. The months that followed brought unexpected contentment. Jasper was true to his word, treating Thea with unfailing courtesy and respect. They fell into a routine of shared breakfasts, afternoons spent with Charlotte, exploring the estate or receiving callers, and evenings in the library where Jasper would read while Thea played the pianoforte or did needlework. Charlotte flourished at Fernhurst. She had her own governess now, a kind young woman named Miss Hartley who delighted in the child's quick mind. She had new dresses and toys, a pony of her own, and most importantly, she had the stability and security that Thea had only dreamed of providing. Society's reaction to the marriage was mixed. Some whispered about the unseemly haste, others about Thea's low birth. But Jasper's status protected her from the worst of it, and gradually she was accepted, if not embraced, by the local gentry. What surprised Thea most was how much she came to enjoy Jasper's company. He was intelligent and well-read, with a dry wit that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He shared her love of music and would often sit beside her at the pianoforte, turning pages or occasionally attempting to play simple duets that dissolved into laughter when his limited musical ability showed itself. He was wonderful with Charlotte, too, patient and engaged in a way that made Thea's heart ache. He taught the child to ride, praised her accomplishments, listened gravely to her childish concerns. Watching them together, Thea would sometimes feel a confusing mix of gratitude and longing, though for what exactly she could not name. As summer turned to autumn, Jasper announced that they would spend the little season in London. It was time, he said, to formally introduce his wife and ward to society at large, to establish Charlotte's position beyond any question. Thea approached the prospect with trepidation. London was where Lady Sybil held court, where the most critical eyes of the ton would judge every aspect of her deportment and find her wanting. But Jasper assured her that he would be by her side, and so she summoned her courage and prepared for the ordeal. The London townhouse was a magnificent structure on Berkeley Square, all elegance and understated wealth. Thea felt overwhelmed by the grandeur, but Jasper's steady presence helped ground her. He hired a lady's maid specifically for her, ensured her wardrobe was appropriate for her new station, and gently coached her on the intricacies of ton etiquette. Their first major social appearance was to be at the Hartwell Ball, one of the most prestigious events of the season. Thea dressed with care in a gown of deep sapphire silk that brought out the blue in her eyes, her hair arranged in an elegant style by her new maid. When she descended the stairs, Jasper was waiting in the entrance hall, and the look on his face when he saw her made her breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said softly. It was the first time he had ever offered her such a personal compliment, and Thea felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you." In the carriage, Jasper took her hand. "Whatever happens tonight, remember that you belong at my side. You are the Marchioness of Fernhurst. Let no one make you feel otherwise." The ballroom was a glittering spectacle of silk and jewels, hundreds of guests moving in elegant patterns beneath massive chandeliers. Heads turned as the Marquess and Marchioness of Fernhurst were announced, and Thea felt the weight of countless curious and judgmental eyes. Jasper led her through the crowd with easy confidence, introducing her to various lords and ladies, his hand warm on the small of her back. Most were polite, some genuinely welcoming. But Thea could feel the undercurrent of speculation and gossip. Then, through the crowd, she saw Lady Sybil. The older woman was dressed in purple silk, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears, holding court near the refreshment tables. Their eyes met across the room, and Lady Sybil's face hardened with fury. She said something to the women around her, and they all turned to stare at Thea with expressions of knowing disdain. Thea's heart sank. She knew what was coming. Lady Sybil made her way through the crowd with the inexorability of a ship of the line, her coterie of followers in her wake. She stopped directly in front of Thea and Jasper, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Why, Jasper?" she said loudly, her voice carrying through the sudden hush that had fallen around them. "How delightful to see you and your charming wife. Though I must confess, I was quite shocked to hear of your marriage. So sudden, so unexpected. One might almost think there was some urgency to the union." The implication was clear and vicious. Thea felt her face flame with humiliation, but Jasper's expression turned to ice. "I am not sure I take your meaning, Lady Sybil," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "Oh, I think you do, nephew. A hasty marriage to a woman of obscure origins, claiming guardianship of an alleged niece. It all seems rather convenient, does it not? Especially given the lack of any evidence of this supposed marriage between Nathaniel and Miss Dorothea Hartwell as she was then." The use of Thea's maiden name was deliberate, an attempt to strip away her married status and reduce her to a commoner of no consequence. Around them, the crowd pressed closer, eager to witness the scandal. "The evidence is substantial and has been reviewed by the finest solicitors in London," Jasper replied, his voice cutting through the whispers like a blade. "My brother's marriage was legal in every respect. Lady Charlotte Winters is his legitimate daughter and my ward. Any suggestion to the contrary is not only false, but slanderous." "Slanderous," Lady Sybil laughed, the sound harsh and ugly. "How convenient that all this evidence suddenly appeared after you decided you needed an heir. Tell me, did you pay this woman to produce a child and claim it was Nathaniel's? Or perhaps the child is yours, and this entire charade is designed to legitimize your own indiscretion." The crowd gasped. It was an accusation so outrageous, so defamatory, that for a moment no one seemed to know how to respond. Thea felt as though she might faint, the room spinning around her. But Jasper stepped forward, placing himself between Thea and Lady Sybil, his fury radiating from him like heat. "Lady Sybil," he said, and his voice was deadly quiet now, each word enunciated with perfect clarity. "You have always been a bitter and cruel woman, but I did not think even you would sink to such depths. Let me make something absolutely clear to you and to everyone present." He turned to address the crowd, his voice rising to carry through the entire ballroom. 6 years ago, my brother Nathaniel married Dorothea Hartwell in a legal ceremony witnessed by a rector and recorded in parish records. He did so secretly because he knew his family, specifically Lady Sybil, would disapprove of his choice. When Nathaniel died at Waterloo, his widow, pregnant with his child, sought assistance from this family. Lady Sybil turned her away with threats and cruelty, telling her that she would be branded a liar and her child declared illegitimate if she persisted in her claims. The crowd was utterly silent now, hanging on every word. Mrs. Winters, as she then was, fled London and raised Charlotte alone in poverty for 5 years, while Lady Sybil concealed the evidence of the marriage and allowed the Ton to believe Nathaniel had died without issue. When I returned from the continent and learned of these events, I was appalled. I located Mrs. Winters and her daughter, verified the legitimacy of the marriage and Charlotte's birth, and offered them the protection and support they should have received from this family from the beginning. He turned back to Lady Sybil, his eyes blazing. "My marriage to Dorothea was undertaken to ensure that she and Charlotte could never again be vulnerable to the cruelty and prejudice you showed them. Charlotte is Nathaniel's daughter, and anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me. As for you, Lady Sybil, you are no longer welcome in my home or my presence. You have committed wrongs against my wife and my ward that I can neither forget nor forgive. From this moment, you are cut from this family entirely." It was social annihilation, delivered in front of the entire Ton. To be cut by the head of one's family was a disgrace from which there was no recovery. Lady Sybil's face went white, then red, her mouth working soundlessly. "You cannot," she finally managed. "You cannot cut me. I am family." "You forfeited that right when you chose cruelty over compassion," Jasper replied implacably. "Now I suggest you leave before I have you removed." Lady Sybil looked around the ballroom, seeking allies, but found only averted eyes and embarrassed silence. The Ton might traffic in gossip and scandal, but they recognized power when they saw it, and Jasper's position was unassailable. Slowly, with what dignity she could muster, Lady Sybil turned and walked from the ballroom, her followers melting away as she passed. The silence that followed was profound. Then, into that silence, Lord Hartwell, one of the most respected peers in England, stepped forward and bowed to Thea. "Marchioness," he said clearly, "would you do me the honor of the next dance?" It was an endorsement, a public declaration of support from a man whose opinion carried immense weight. Thea, still shaking from the confrontation, managed a curtsy. "I would be honored, my lord." As Lord Hartwell led her to the dance floor, others began to approach Jasper, offering their congratulations on his marriage, their support for his position. By the end of the evening, it was clear that society had accepted Thea as the Marchioness of Fernhurst, and Lady Sybil's attempt to destroy her reputation had backfired spectacularly. In the carriage returning home, Thea sat beside Jasper in silence for several minutes before she could trust her voice. "Thank you," she finally whispered. "Thank you for defending me, for believing in me." Jasper took her hand in his grip warm and firm. "I did not do it because I felt obligated, Thea. I did it because I could not stand to hear you maligned and insulted, because the thought of anyone hurting you made me want to commit violence." He paused, then continued more quietly. Because somewhere in these past months, you have become far more to me than a convenient solution to a problem. Thea's heart raced. Jasper? He turned to face her fully, and in the dim light of the carriage lamps, his eyes were intense. I am in love with you, Thea. I think I have been falling in love with you since the day you walked into my library, with your head held high and your daughter's hand in yours, brave and fierce and determined. I married you out of duty and honor, but I would marry you again tomorrow out of love alone. Tears spilled down Thea's cheeks. I thought you could never love me. I thought this was just an arrangement. It started as an arrangement, Jasper agreed, reaching up to cup her face gently. But you have become everything to me. You and Charlotte both, my family, my heart. May I kiss you, Thea? As your husband, not just your protector? In answer, Thea leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was sweet and tender, full of promise and new beginning. When they finally drew apart, both were smiling through tears. I love you too, Thea confessed. I was afraid to admit it, afraid you would not want my love. I want everything you are willing to give me, Jasper replied. Your love, your trust, your future. Will you truly be my wife, Thea? In every sense of the word? Yes, she breathed. Yes, Jasper. I will. They spent that night together for the first time, their marriage finally consummated in tenderness and love rather than cold duty. Thea woke in Jasper's arms as dawn broke over London, feeling safer and more cherished than she had ever felt in her life. The months that followed were a revelation. Their marriage transformed from polite civility to genuine partnership to passionate love. Jasper was an attentive and generous lover, patient and tender, and Thea discovered depths of feeling and desire she had never known existed. Charlotte bloomed under their combined care, secure in the love of both her mother and the man she had begun to call Uncle Papa. When Thea discovered she was expecting a child the following spring, Charlotte was thrilled at the prospect of a sibling. They returned to Fernhurst for the birth, Thea wanting to bring her second child into the world in the place that had become truly home. The labor was long but ultimately successful, and Jasper wept openly when the midwife placed his son in his arms. He has your eyes, Thea said softly from the bed, exhausted but radiant. He has his mother's courage, Jasper replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Thank you, my love. Thank you for this gift. For everything. Charlotte was permitted to come in and meet her new brother, and she climbed carefully onto the bed beside Thea, peering at the tiny, red-faced infant with fascination. He is very small, she observed. You were once this small, Thea told her with a smile. Will he be my real brother? Charlotte asked. Even though we have different papas? He will be your real brother in every way that matters, Jasper assured her, resting his hand on Charlotte's dark curls. You are both equally my children, equally loved. On a soft summer afternoon a year later, the Marquess and Marchioness of Fernhurst stood together in the rose garden, watching Charlotte play with her baby brother on a blanket spread beneath an ancient oak. Thomas, at 14 months, was a sturdy toddler with his father's dark hair and his mother's gentle nature. Charlotte, now 7, was patient and loving with him, helping him stand and applauding when he took his wobbly steps. Jasper wrapped his arm around Thea's waist, drawing her close. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Accepting my proposal that day? Thea looked up at him, this man who had saved her when she was at her most desperate, who had defended her honor and claimed her heart. Not for a single moment, she replied honestly. You gave me everything, Jasper. Security, respect, love. You gave Charlotte a father and a brother. You gave me a home and a family. You gave me far more than I gave you, Jasper said, pressing a kiss to her temple. You gave me purpose. You taught me that duty and love need not be separate, that the best marriages are built on both. You healed the parts of me I thought were broken beyond repair." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their children play, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. A gardener passed by and tipped his hat respectfully. From the house, the sound of preparations for dinner drifted on the breeze. "I never imagined this could be my life," Thea confessed. "When I was hiding in Cornwall, afraid every day that someone would come and take Charlotte from me, I could not have dreamed of this happiness." "You deserved happiness, Thea. You always did. I am simply grateful I was given the chance to provide it." Charlotte looked up from the blanket and waved. "Mama! Uncle Papa! Come see! Thomas is walking!" They hurried over together, laughing as Thomas took 3 tottering steps before sitting down hard on his bottom, looking surprised but pleased with himself. Charlotte clapped and praised him, and Thomas laughed his delighted baby laugh. Jasper scooped up his son, while Thea embraced Charlotte, and the 4 of them sat together on the blanket, a family complete and content. The rose garden bloomed around them, bees hummed in the flower beds, and somewhere in the distance a thrush sang its evening song. Thea looked at her husband, at their children, at the home they had built together from what had begun as the most practical of arrangements. She thought of Nathaniel, resting in his grave far from here, and silently thanked him for leading her to this place, to this man, to this life. She hoped he could see them and know that Charlotte was loved and safe, that Thea had found happiness again. Jasper met her gaze and smiled, that warm, intimate smile he reserved only for her, and Thea's heart swelled with love and gratitude. They had both been broken once, wounded by loss and cruelty. But together, they had healed each other, built something beautiful from the wreckage of the past. As the sun sank lower on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, the family made their way back to the house, Thomas in his father's arms, Charlotte holding her mother's hand. Behind them, the rose garden grew soft with evening shadows, patient and eternal, a witness to the love that had transformed 2 strangers into the truest of partners, the deepest of friends, the most devoted of spouses. This was home. This was family. This was love. Dear listener, perhaps you too have faced moments when the future seemed impossibly dark, when fear for those you love consumed your every thought. Like Thea, you may have known what it is to be alone, to be judged unfairly, to feel that safety and happiness are forever beyond your reach. But remember this, sometimes our darkest hours are simply the darkness before dawn. The courage you find to protect those you love, the dignity you maintain in the face of cruelty, the hope you cling to when all seems lost. These are not wasted. They are transforming you into someone stronger, someone ready to receive the blessings that await. Your story is not over. The chapters yet unwritten may hold joys you cannot now imagine. Trust that you are seen, that your struggles matter, that your love and sacrifice are building toward something beautiful. And know that you are worthy of the happiness you seek. Thank you for staying with us until the end of Thea and Jasper's journey. If this story of courage, redemption, and unexpected love touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories of hope and resilience.